The Digital Landscape of Nudging, a systematic literature review of empirical research on digital nudges. My name is Kristoffer, and I'm going to take you through this paper. The summary of this paper is as follows. Our paper synthesizes peer-reviewed empirical studies on digital nudging. The results from our review lead to 9 future research questions that can be addressed by the HCI community. Over the last 5 years, there has been a steep increase in research output on the topic of digital nudging. I'm illustrating this with a stacked bar chart on the number of search results related to digital nudging across 7 databases here. I will now walk us through some definitions that are important to the context of a paper. I'll illustrate what digital nudging is by talking about its analog counterpart. A concrete example that highlights the inevitability of nudging comes from a cafeteria. There is no neutral way to arrange and present the foods in a cafeteria. This leads the designer to inevitably guide the choices and behaviors of guests. This is what we mean by nudging. The cafeteria is what we call a choice architecture when it comes to selecting foods. Digital environments or user interfaces can be thought of in the same way. Now, nudging in the digital realm differs from its analog counterpart in some important ways. A cafeteria or any physical environment has certain native constraints that aren't necessarily present in digital environments. Digital choice architectures can be personalized for individual users, and they can also be interconnected between users. We go into more detail about this in the full paper. Also, digital nudges come in different forms. They can be categorized. In this paper, we refer to these differences as nudge patterns. The full paper contains many examples of how these patterns are applied in the literature. Here is a very brief summary of previous review articles on the topic of digital nudging. This table highlights that some aspects have not been investigated yet. In any case, I encourage curious people to read these because they have all made important contributions on the topic. Now, the aim of this review is to investigate the characteristics of personalization and interconnectedness in relation to literature on digital nudging. We will map the specific problems that digital nudges tend to address, and we will also investigate practices such as how digital nudges are combined and how they are evaluated. This leads to a discussion of 9 future research questions that can be addressed by the HCI community. The methodology of the review is described here along a Prisma flowchart. This shows the 4 phases of identifying the literature, screening, eligibility assessment, and the resulting corpus of articles for the analysis. Most of the included papers can be found in well-known conference venues in information systems and computer science. A concept matrix was then compiled in an iterative fashion while the included papers were read. This resulted in an analysis of 73 articles where we counted 109 studies where we could identify 231 digital nudges that were demonstrated and evaluated. This means that one paper may contain several studies investigating several different nudge patterns. Here I'm partially showing a large table from the paper that is summarizing the codes associated to all of the included articles. Before I give some snapshots of the results and discussion, I'll frame them around certain limitations. The selected articles only span a certain time frame. More scientific databases could have been added to our list. The keywords used also impose limits on the scope of our results. and a different search strategy could yield more related articles on the topic. Also, the only source of evidence that we investigated was peer-reviewed conference and journal articles. We'll now take a look at some of the results, and I'll try to point out some relevant future research questions that we discuss in the full paper. Here we're looking at how digital nudges are distributed across these 10 patterns in a bar chart. The full paper contains more concrete examples of how these nudges are applied in practice. Here we can see that many of these nudge patterns are not being applied in choice architectures that we consider personalized and interconnected between users. This is shown with a bubble chart. This leads us to ask the following future research question. How can the impact on users from interconnected and personalized choice architecture be better quantified and understood by researchers? Next, we're looking at a clustered bar chart of studies with a behavioral outcome and what type of behavior change that's being addressed. What we see here is that many nudges are aimed at increasing a familiar behavior or instigating a new one. This leads us to the following future research question. Is a given digital nudge as effective at stopping or decreasing a behavior as it is at initiating or increasing one? This is about the symmetry of effects when it comes to nudging. Finally, here's a quick look at how digital nudges tend to be combined in the literature. Notice that there are a lot of knowledge gaps in this heat map. There are still many questions around how digital nudges interact. Do they cancel each other out when they're combined, or can they amplify one another when you use certain combinations? As a future research question, we're asking, how do digital nudges interact and through which mechanisms? If you are curious, more results and future research questions can be found in the full paper. With that, I thank you for your time and attention.